adventure games, and more adventure games. We're in the 90s, and adventure games are a real deal. On one side you have your LucasArts adventures, and on the other your Sierra stuff. From in between these two, from time to time, comes something different, and today we're going to take a look at something different, alright. Introducing Normality, developed and published by Gremlin Interactive for DOS and Windows PCs in June of 1996. Looking at the box, we have this out-of-the-box box art with a psychedelic look, a television, a green hand with long nails, and a guy doing some sort of Egyptian dance moves, letting you know that it is Normality. The back of the box has your typical screenshots of the back of the box and lets you know that you are Kent, a shameless dreamer in the city of Neutropolis. Incredible details, 100 motion capture sequences, fully rendered characters, and open doors to meet people. Alright then. It also lets you know about the unique Voodoo doll point-and-click interface. Voodoo. That's cool. Looking inside the box, we have a small jewel case manual with instructions on how to install and play the game, and also some situationism, man. Finally, we get a circular piece of plastic which contains the game. And Normality starts with a copyright logo because, again, it's the 90s and copying games was a thing, followed by the Gremlin Interactive logo, followed by a very film noir introduction, which has nothing to do with the mood of the game.
I began to learn the shady history of Neutropolis shortly after my week-long holiday in the Blue Pens.
After the film noir sequence, our main protagonist Kent is whistling while taking a stroll in the streets of Neutropolis and is arrested because he's too happy, apparently.
Whoa! Hi guys. I spent 7 lousy days in a Spartan blue box.
The game then starts at the beginning, no questions asked. The player takes control of Kent, and the game assumes the form of a first-person, point-and-click adventure game. Yep, aside from the aforementioned pre-rendered sequences, the game is played through Kent's perspective. In Normality, your objective is to assume the control of Kent, a seemingly friendly slacker and resident of the city of Neutropolis, a depressing place where ominous black clouds perpetually block the sun, and a strict social code is enforced upon residents which strictly prohibits acts of creativity, individuality, or any other behavior that would otherwise cause a person to deviate from the established standards of what's accepted as normal. Naturally, Kent is one of the few free thinkers left in this society, and throughout the course of the story, the player's job is to unravel the maneuverings of the evil dictator of Neutropolis and liberate the residents of the city from his oppressive grip, bringing back hope and joy to the masses. While back in the day this didn't sound very appealing for a 15-year-old, nowadays it is different. Although the humor isn't especially clever or subtle, the jokes are obvious and not particularly funny, they're not bad enough to dislike the game. The movement system is somewhat unusual for adventure games, or at least for that time it was. Being a first-person 3D adventure game, you do move like in a first-person game using either the arrow keys or by holding the left mouse button down and steering with it. You truly move through space, and the background changes perspective incrementally as you move. You can move to nearly anywhere in the game environment. Page up and page down keys enable you to look up or down. There is a lot of freedom, much like in a first-person non-shooter. The game's interface is handled primarily via a menu accessed by right-clicking the mouse, which brings the voodoo doll to the screen, very similar to the system used in Full Throttle, which hosts the standard complement of adventure gaming actions, like talk, use, examine, etc. As a nice touch, these are alternately available via keyboard shortcuts. The movement system is very smooth, but do expect some 90s pixelation as you approach objects. Nevertheless, despite the darkness surrounding Neutropolis, all the game's locations are quite colorful, filled with objects and NPCs to interact with. Although there isn't a ton of dialogue options per character, I find these to be entertaining, and I do like Kent's silly surfer and kind of stoner attitude, despite clearly remembering back then that being a major complaint about the game. Yes, his accent and remarks do get somewhat repetitive, but the game is meant to be humorous.
A nodding bird toy, very popular in the 1970s. Aha! It's keeping the TV on. Yes, this might fool that rookie Norm out on the landing. Pecking bird plus stubborn remote equals permanently on TV. Yo, dude!
Perhaps the greatest strength of Normality lies in its puzzles. These are primarily inventory-based and, while not terribly difficult, should provide a decent challenge to most gamers. And yes, the hardcore Sierra adventurers will find the game an easy one, but again, this is supposed to be a lightweight adventure game. The inventory is large enough to see all objects clearly. It is not in view at all times and appears in the middle of the screen when you use the I key or click on the top right icon. Kent will tell you about an object in inventory if you right-click on it. You can use the left mouse button and drag objects into the playing screen to use them on other objects. Clicking on any area outside your inventory, the window will close. I do believe that the biggest flaw in Normality is that, for an adventure game, which is fairly long, the player doesn't really care about any of the characters, not even the main protagonist Kent. There is no real background to them, only a couple of lines, in some cases where you learn something about the past, which is always attached to the current state of Neutropolis, and for an adventure game this is a no-no. But let's go back to the plot. Basically, Kent has to figure out how to overthrow an oppressive, mood-controlling government. He is thrown into some sort of brainwashing facility for having whistled a happy tune in a public street, and while in prison, he receives a mysterious note with a clue on how to find out why everyone in the city has been turned into zombies.
Then, on the last day, frustrated? Want to meet some like-minded individuals? Want to do something about the state of the city? Get a job and snoop around Plush Rest. You'll find a group in one of the dumpsters around the back.
After Kent is released from prison, he's thrown into his own apartment and ordered to watch TV 24 hours a day. Like I've said before, 15-year-old me saw the plot like another stick it to the man kind of thing. Just chilling, whatever dude, peace and love, a game a la The Big Lebowski, awesome movie by the way, which would come out a couple of years later, but there's more to Normality than meets the eye.
I spent 7 lousy days in a Spartan blue box, basically for being too happy. And on every one of those days, those norm guys piped into my cell what can only be described as elevator music. Normalizing, they call it. Whew.
No, I'm not going to dig deep into the never-ending rabbit hole of sociology, because the game also doesn't do that. But Normality doesn't hide its critique about society in the 90s. A city where police authority is a metaphor for norm, those imposed by society, shared standards of acceptable behavior by groups, and deemed to be powerful drivers of human behavior. The metaphor of watching TV 24 hours a day for some misinformation and control of opinions, turning people into non-thinking human beings. The oligarchy of Neutropolis, where the power is held by a small group, which see the dumb population as a path to maintain this way of lifestyle. Again, not that Normality reaches deep into these issues, but they are present, and dealing with them in a humorous way is probably the best way. Funny to see, or maybe not, that after all these years, how a critique to a 90s society, blinded by misinformation, capitalism and possession, lazy to look at the real problems in the world, is so up to date. This within an enjoyable first-person 3D adventure game.
Normalizing, they call it. Whew.
And if not for that reason alone, you should give Normality a try, because you can find it nowadays on GOG. If you enjoyed this video, leave it a thumbs up and support the channel by clicking that subscribe button. As always, thank you very much for watching this, and until my next video, please do take care.
I'll page Mr. Brinkler right away. Mr. Brinkler, there is an interviewee to see you.
Shall we through, eh?
Please go through to the plush rest hospitality niche. Make yourself comfortable. Mr. Brinkler will be along presently.